Something has been watching, not just us, but you too. At Paranormal M, the veil lifts, and the watchers are revealed. Subscribe and stare back into the dark. Pizza magic trick. Something paranormal was somehow a joke. This happened to me like 2 to 3 years ago. So I was 14 or 15. My parents had ordered a pizza for dinner. I'd love to go full-on details, but I can't remember if it was from Domino's or H&G, a local pizzeria. If you'll need it, I'll give the location. It wasn't the first time we ordered from any of those two. The delivery guy came and my stepmother paid, and we left the pizza box under the TV on it. Sort of one of those tables that go under the TV. When we had the table ready, we proceeded to open the pizza box, which turned out to be empty. Naturally, my stepmother called the pizza place complaining about it, which was obviously a huge mistake from them. The thing is they told us the pizza was indeed there, and it had 100% been delivered. And the strangest thing of them all is we should check again, which is not a thing you'd say in this situation. Usually a pizza is a thing you can't mistake for the bottom of a box easily. After telling us that last sentence like 3 times, each one in an angrier tone, my stepmother opened the box again. The pizza was there. And to this day, I'm 100% that this wasn't a joke by my parents, because I didn't leave the room, and I was looking at the TV the whole time. So of course, looking at the same direction the pizza box was, and it also didn't have a double floor or something because the box was standard sized. My parents also started nervously laughing and saying the delivery guy must have done a magic trick. But we were not in a situation in which we felt comfortable enough to be making jokes. I've only told this story like twice to in real life friends, and I still haven't gotten anything more than "you're lying and making it up." I swear I'm not. Someone or something on the roof. I think it was 1997. I was around 9 or 10 years old at the time, because I remember being in the 4th grade that time. Apologies for my English, it's not my first language. I'm from a poor country. My siblings and I grew up in a small island. Our parents usually aren't around as they worked abroad and only come home once a year. Your parents only come home once a year? We're usually left with our grandmother and a babysitter, and I won't make this long and get to the point. One night, when we were all sleeping, I suddenly got woken up by a loud thud in a roof, and the roof is made of metal sheets. Also, note that neighbors are not present at this time, pretty much alone in that area, mostly trees surrounding our home. First thought it was one of our chickens. Usually our chicken flies on our roof if something startles them at night. And then as soon as I hear the next thud, I know it was something big, like at least human-sized. Also, I know the distinct sound of the chicken claws when they walk on the roof. You can clearly know it was a chicken. So by this time, I'm already terrified, and I was thinking at this time maybe somebody was trying to rob us. My first thought was to wake up everyone. So I looked down my bunk bed and was planning to go down when I saw my babysitter already standing beside my brother's bed, which was under me. I whispered, "Did you hear it as well?" And she replied, "Yeah, be quiet." Then I slowly went down and stand beside her. Our babysitter was a small lady, almost the same height as me when I was 10, thin, so the thought of somebody robbing us with just me and a small lady and an elderly woman and my 2 little brothers is terrifying. We were listening closely at the footsteps in the room, and in sounds like it was circling around the area where our room was. You can't see anything outside as well. It's pretty much pitch black. By this time, I was behind her when she decided to lean in front of the window to hear what it was. Well, more clearly, I guess. But suddenly, the footstep stops, and there was this stench, a rotting smell. Me and the babysitter look at each other and we're covering our noses, when suddenly, out of nowhere, something crashes to the window, made a loud bang. Thankfully, our window has like a metal sheet for mosquitoes, so nothing went inside. We both screamed, and the babysitter started to pray at this point. My brothers were woken up as well. I was hiding my sheets and crying, and the babysitter told us to sleep and then everything would be okay. She was visibly scared as well. She was crying too, and followed up with a terrible sleep paralysis after about 3 or 4 hours. I think when I finally got tired and fell back to sleep, and, well, I'm 37 now. I have 2 kids, and this experience still haunts me to this day. I always brought it, like, whenever me and my brother get together, I brought it up, I guess. And they remember it, but it seems it doesn't have much of an impact to them than myself. Grim Reaper. I don't even know what I saw. Let me just start by saying that I'm a man that believes in God and also the devil. And a few months ago, I was just SM*KING smacking at a spot that me and my friends go to. Alrighty then. We post up and kick it, and we even took a picture for our demo there. It's kind of a staple spot, you know. No, I don't know. Anyways, I'm there doing my thing, setting up the stuff, and all of a sudden I see what I thought was just a homeless man going up to the parking lot upstairs. Mind you, it's totally normal for people to go up these stairs. Some people work out or go to the mall, or teenagers go on dates, etc. I do a double take because this person was not any ordinary person. They had a wide frame, but super skinny. Really skeleton-like, honestly. But they had on like rugs of clothes, like a rug made into clothes, but no face. I cannot stress this enough. No face. It was just black, and he didn't even have a mask, just a hood that was pitch black. No shape of a head, nothing. Literally, pitch black. He walked up to the driver's side, front fender of my car, just started mimicking and throwing stuff over the edge of the parking lot. It looked like he was throwing breadcrumbs to pigeons over the edge of the 4th parking lot, but he had nothing in his hand, and at first I was frozen because I was trying to figure out what he was doing or what the hell was happening. Until I caught notice that it felt like he was telling me to jump off the edge. I got instantly spooked. I reversed my car and left. And every now and then I go back to that floor, but the complete opposite side because they closed that half. But I can't stop thinking, did they close that half because somebody else saw him? Or was this just a visit from some sort of a spirit? The more I think about it or try to talk about it, scary stuff happens. Or maybe I'm just paranoid. I know it's not the weed man. I know it's real, what I saw. The weed man. Humorous ghost story that wasn't a ghost story. I had a good friend who lived in a local neighborhood of Victorian homes. Lots of ghost stories in the area, but she was not a believer. Until she saw something. She said she was just waking up, and she saw a smoky-looking shape near her bed. Another time, she saw something similar in her living room. She recounted this at a get-together with me and my son. He was about 8 years old at the time. He became very excited and told her, "Miss Sue, you know what you have to do is you have to talk dirty to it." What? Stunned silence from the whole group, and she very kindly told him that she would consider it. Okay, and on the way home, I asked him what he meant by that. He said, "Yeah, talk dirty to it. Tell him you're bad and to go away." I explained that talking dirty meant something entirely differently than insults, and he looked very worried and said he hoped Miss Sue didn't actually talk dirty to the ghost. And later my friend found out that one of her medications could cause visual disturbances. As the doctor explained this, she was very relieved and then told the doctor what she would have done if it was an actual ghost. Thanks to 8-year-old Joey. Talk dirty to it. Why not? Man who built my house now spiritually occupies it. In my life, I have reluctantly had random occurrences of seeing and sensing and hearing from or dreaming about people who have died. It is jarring and unwelcome. I won't share every experience here, but will open up about my recent predicament that I'm seeking guidance on. We bought a lovely home from a couple that chose us for the property because of our environmental and farming values. The man built it by hand when he was in his 20s, now into their 70s. They had to move closer to services since his dementia was progressing. He died this February, and his wife and I had written to each other over the 5 years of living here. She invited us to the funeral so that way we could learn more about the incredible person who built her house. At the service, the wife told a story that she saw her husband from the living room a few days after his death, staring at her and looking at peace. It was very heartfelt and real to her. Recently, I have seen an occasional form in her home. I often confuse it with being my husband, and I have seen a cat here since we moved in. We joked that when this man died, he'd visit this home. Well, it's clearly now the case. Any guidance, well, I've always shut myself off when I feel or see a spirit. But this was a good man, and I don't particularly want to cohabitate, so how do I help him move on, knowing that we will continue to care for his home and land? I wanted to share this story with the community. Let me know what you think. Hello, I wanted to share a story about something I experienced nearly 25 years ago. An experience I still think about to this day. I don't write often, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. A bit of background before the story. My parents divorced when I was around 4 or maybe 5 years old. Fortunately, both remarried happily, and I spent every other weekend with my dad, and one of the perks of having 2 families was getting to celebrate most holidays twice. This particular story takes place during my school's Christmas break. My dad was picking me up early on Christmas Day, after I'd opened gifts at my mom's house. So they were heading to my stepmother's parents' house in Sequim, Washington. The day started off normally. Good food, drinks, gifts, and nothing out of the ordinary. After presents were opened, I made my way downstairs to watch Little Giants on VHS. My grandparents, they had an old-style TV with a click knob that took me a little while to figure out how to use, and about halfway through that movie, I needed to use the restroom. And to get there, you had to walk down a long hallway that stretched the length of the house. There were 3 doors, On the left was a giant boiler room, and on the right a creepy untouched bedroom, and straight ahead an outdated bathroom. I used the bathroom, washed my hands, and turned off the sink. And as I started heading back to the couch to finish my movie, I passed the boiler room, and suddenly I heard the sink turn on full blast behind me, and I froze and the air turned ice cold. I felt it creep up my back to the base of my skull. It felt like cold fingers were touching me. I couldn't move, and I physically could not turn around. It felt like something was behind me, something that wanted me to look. I started walking slowly back to the couch, refusing to turn my head. I sat down and pressed play on the VHS player, pretending the sink wasn't still running. A few minutes passed, maybe 2 or 3, and before I finally started to glance over my shoulder to see if it was safe. Eventually, I worked up the courage to go back into the bathroom. When I got inside, the sink was still blasting full force. Both the hot and cold handles were turned on to the max. Water was splashing out of the sink and all over the floor. I quickly grabbed a towel and started wiping up the mess around the sink. There was no way I would have left the sink on like that. I was probably 14 or 15 years old at the time and definitely knew better. And after turning everything off, I went upstairs to tell my dad what had happened, and he looked at me confused and didn't say anything about it again. I've been seeing a white figure once a year for 11 years, and I'm not the only one. Since I was 10 years old, I've been seeing the same white figure just once a year, always in June. She never stays long, just a few seconds, and I've seen her in different places, the home, in different apartments, and even on vacation. She follows me, not the location. The first time I saw her was the same day I opened one of those creepy chain emails. Yeah, I know. I'm not saying it was because of that, but it freaks me out how the timing lined up exactly. And she's always the same. A white silhouette, no facial features, no clothes. No movement, just standing there still. I've never gotten an evil feeling from her, but the fact that this has been happening for 11 years is deeply unsettling. I've moved houses multiple times, and she's always just reappearing. One year I didn't see her, but my ex-boyfriend, who doesn't believe in anything paranormal, and who I never told about her, casually told me the next morning. I went to the bathroom, and in the middle of the night, it looked like there was this white figure sitting on top of you while he slept. He described her exactly as I see her, and I hadn't said a word to him about it. And now, this year, something changed. A few days ago, again in June, I didn't see her, but I heard her. I was on a video call with my boyfriend, and out of nowhere, we both heard this clear, sharp sobbing sound coming from the hallway, like a woman crying, just for a second. It was loud enough for him to hear it through the call. I've ruled out every rational explanation I could think of. There was nothing and no one there. And I've been trying to ignore it for years, but now that it's escalated to sound, I don't know what she wants. I don't know what I should do. If anyone's had a similar experience or knows what this could be, I'd really appreciate any thoughts or advice. I wrote the original post at 4 a.m. while shaking in my mom's bed, and no joke, I just couldn't sleep in my room that night. She always shows up whenever I sleep, and it's like she follows my bed, not my house. And I've moved 3 times, and every single time she appeared in a new bedroom, even on vacation. I have seen her in 2 different apartments by the sea. I expected more lighthearted theories, or maybe comforting comments, because honestly, she's never made me feel like I was in danger. Of course I get scared when she shows up. I mean, Hello, it's a literal entity standing there. But it's never felt evil. Just intense and mysterious. And I had forgotten to describe her in the original post. She basically looks like a floating tampon. What? More seriously, like a person standing still, completely covered by a white sheet. No facial features, no limbs showing, just there and watching. That is not what a tampon looks like, but alrighty then. What freaked me out yesterday wasn't just the sound we heard, it was the way my older cat suddenly ran away, and the second it happened, like my kitten kept chewing my foot like nothing was going on, and that contrast hit weirdly. And also, my little sister has seen her too. She saw her once on vacation, and ever since then she always closes the door to my room when we go to bed, saying that she doesn't like the feeling it gives off. There's honestly way more to the story, but 11 years is a long time. I'll be writing for hours. Still really shaken up, and I guess I just hoped for answers that wouldn't leave me more scared than before. Also, sorry for the English, it's not my first language. I'm from Croatia, a small European country where people would probably just think I'm crazy for sharing this. We don't really have legit mediums or spiritual support around here. The church would probably laugh me out of the building. Had a weird experience, looking for others' opinions on it. I've condensed down the following events from earlier today. It was over the span of like an hour or more, and I have screenshots of the word history from the app. I just gotta figure out how to add them. I've recently downloaded GhostTube after doing a tiny bit of research on the best ghost hunting app. I downloaded it for shits and giggles mostly, but was like kind of aware there could be something, so I tried to be mindful when using it. Anyways, I've only had the app for 3 days. It's a terrible app, by the way. Today I was busy at the shop, but I parked in a quiet area with no one around. Boredom got me, and I opened up the app. The first thing it said was sit with me. Jokingly, I say aloud I'm already sitting, and encourage anything there to make itself known to use the app to communicate. It says hammer, and I say something like, is that how you died? There was then currently silence for quite a bit until it said sit with me again, and as I was responding to it about how I already was seated again, I hear tapping. It's like it sounded like someone tapping on the inside of a car boot. This car is like 2 years old, and I was alone with no one around, no other cars. So I was scared. I messaged somebody close to me to calm down. I opened it up again a minute later and say, hag. Jokingly, I said, rude, that's no way to call a woman, and it went silent for a bit. Then it said, are you recording? Accidentally, I said yes, then said wait, and no it's not, and I can't because it wants me to pay for more space. Shortly after it said move quickly, so I did as it said and moved slightly, looking around to see if there's anything to move away from, and moved my arm quickly off the middle console of the car. It then said sword, went silent for a bit. I was saying something about not having a sword. It then says afterlife. I said yes. I think you're in the afterlife or some kind of limbo. I started to hear a bunch of random tapping, really fast tempos. It's coming from the same spot for about a minute, and I swear under my breath, because, like, what the fuck? And then it says the grave, and I reply, don't think there's any graves here. Are you in a grave? The tapping stops, and there is like at least 9 to 14 taps. Then it said she will touch you, and I was thinking, what the fuck, and instantly had a weird feeling on my thigh and said loud and clear in a strong voice, do not touch me. You're not allowed to. And it stopped. Well, that's convenient. That creeped me the fuck out, and I left the app open, and 5 minutes later it said, "I live here." And I said, "Cool," and something it's not allowed to come home or attach itself to me or anything near me, and it blurted out incorrect, and heard a couple of taps. So I say again, "You're not allowed to come home with me." And then it says, "Why are you asking?" To which I said, "I'm not." It was silent for a bit before it said, "Consciousness." I said, "Yes, you and I are conscious, and I have to go shortly after I told it bye." The weird tapping that I can't explain really spooked me, as well as the touching thing. Haven't heard or seen anything since, and haven't had anything like that before. I'd really appreciate opinions or thoughts. That app has a bunch of preloaded phrases, so amongst a bunch of other red flags. So I don't have anything that is worthy of saying that doesn't make me sound bad. Moving on. Sleep paralysis and other experiences. Everyone I see has a color haze around them. I can only see it in my brain, not wholly with my eyes, if that makes sense. And I do not call them auras myself, although other people in my life do, and love to hear what color I see them as. Some people's color, like my mom's, they're static, while others change between a few colors. My brain also associates letters, numbers, and words and months with like a specific, usually static color as well. If anybody wants me to talk more about that, I'd be more than happy to, in the appropriate subreddit. That being said, I never see humans as black, white, or gray. That fact plays a very important role for me in, well, a few of these instances. Here are my experiences in chronological order. 16 years old. I used to house or pet and babysit for some family friends. The house was super old, and I hated the feeling of being watched. I felt in that house from the day we helped them move in. The house was really old and made all the old house noises. The house alarm would go off in the middle of the night, as would the doors opening ding-ding that newer alarm systems do. My room and bathroom, for when I stayed there, was tucked in the back corner on the opposite side of the house from anything else. And I hated the feeling I got going back there. So I'd always sleep on the couch in the back living room, and only go back there to deal with cat feeding and litter box things. When you first walk in the house, to your right is the front of the living room, and then further right is the dining room. To your immediate left is an exposed staircase facing the front door leading up to a bonus room that was set up to be a playroom. Then, through a threshold to the back and the front living room led to the back living room, hallway to the master bed and bath and kids' bed and bath and kitchen, and hallway to my bed and bath. Once when I was babysitting the kids, a 5-year-old female and a 6-year-old male, we were playing hide and seek. I was laying on my back on the couch in front of the living room counting. I heard the kids go upstairs to hide. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't physically move, and breathing was almost impossible. Sitting on my chest was a girl about my size, 5'4", 90 pounds, sitting crisscross applesauce on my chest, looking down, like just at me, with long black stringy hair. I think The Grudge meets The Ring, only she was all black and misty and had no face. Then I heard the kids calling for me, and I started panicking. I couldn't move, and all I was thinking was, she's gonna kill them. She's going to kill them, and I'll have no explanation, because the demon is going to kill the kids. Then the kids started coming down the stairs to get me, and as soon as they got far enough down that I could see them, she vanished, and I could move and I could breathe again. I never let them be in a different room than me in that house ever again, and I never saw her again. but the feeling was always there, still, even well into my adulthood. 16 to 18 years old, after the girl, I started having bouts of sleep paralysis at home. It was throughout the rest of high school. They only happened if my closet doors were opened. The weird spring hinge foldy ones. The ones that you kind of have to close at the same time and open way too easily. Anyway, a man in a top hat hunched over because he's too tall to stand in my closet. Black and misty. Best I can describe him as a mixture of Slender Man and Babadook, which I did not watch until years later and had a terrifying revelation the first time I did watch it. I would feel watched even with the doors closed, because the gaps were so big, but the paralysis only happened if the doors opened in the night. 19 years old. All through high school, I had this very controlling boyfriend I was head over heels in love with, and he was a year younger than me. And on track to be a Marine, I saw him all the way through that journey up to a nasty breakup. One of his biggest rules was, I'm going to be a Marine, and that means I'll be the best. The Marines aren't allowed to smoke pot, so that means you're not allowed to smoke pot. If I ever catch you smoking pot, I'll break up with you. Once again, head over heels, so once we broke up in college, I drove out to my best friend's apartment for the weekend to do all the things I was never allowed to do with him. A friend of a friend of a friend I didn't know, they brought over some pot, and quick side note, I had a small stint where I smoked cigarettes for said boyfriend, and found out that I get addicted to things very easily, and will only chain smoke. We sat in her bathroom and I smoked about maybe 1.5 bowls in less than 3 minutes. It wasn't hitting and I didn't know what I was doing. I'll go ahead and let you all know now. What I didn't find out much later is it was indeed not pot, but K2 black magic, and I tripped. I teleported to my friend's bathroom in her childhood home. I teleported to different colors, just floating in a fetal position surrounded by each color, one of which I still can't name or describe. She had this wall-sized tapestry of an owl, and it kept talking to me. So they moved me out into the living room while they played Goat Simulator. And there it was. This was a small apartment, so she had a vertical washer and dryer combo in the common space. My brain was sending out sonar to the whole room, and I could feel pretty much everything with my brain. The cabinets, the crown molding, the light fixtures, and then there he was. A man, a little bit over 6 feet tall, faceless, bald, and naked with an elongated head. Balled up into a fetal position over the washer and dryer, all black and misty. Just like the girl that, well, that's what she appeared as anyways. He never looked at me, but he knew I was in there, and he knew I could see him. I just watched him until I passed out. I told my friend about it the next morning, and she brushed it off, and she's always been a very staunch atheist, and by the way, I'm not. Never believed in anything on the other side, really. The next summer, best friend and friend number 2 and I went to the beach for our yearly weekend. Friend number 2 and I were talking about the previous year, and he started talking about how he felt a presence in her apartment near the door to her room, right beside the washer and dryer. I then shared my experience with him, and he confirmed what he felt was a very similar energy to what I described. She brushed it off again until, a year later, she texted me to let me know that she got really drunk one night, and she saw him and continued to feel the presence on after that. It affected her so much that she ended up moving apartments. Needless to say, I've never had any desire to consume any substance since then. At 26 years old, I had a major break from my sleep paralysis through college and the early years of my marriage. Then one night, a little over a year ago, when I was pregnant with my son, it happened again. Our bedroom is very small and can only be set up in a certain way, because the bedroom and bathroom doors, they both open into the bedroom. When laying in bed, the bedroom door opens towards you, and the bathroom door opens away from you. Important side note, my bathroom was built on by our landlord, and it's not insulated and has no vents. So whatever temperature it is outside, it's that in my bathroom. So I have a heater that runs in there in the winter, with a red light on it. My husband was on night shift at this time, and my daughter, almost 2 years old, was in the room. Both dogs and cats were in my room as well. And somehow, my bathroom door unlatched and opened just a crack. Almost to the top of the door appears 4 abnormally long, bony, pale fingers that wrap around the edge of the door, eerily dimly lit with the red glow from the light on the heater. Then the paralysis sets in. Every so often, the finger just taps on the door in slow succession, like somebody drumming their fingers on a table, but hauntingly slow. I watched for what I think was hours. I was able to move my eyes away once, and as soon as I did, I heard the door creaking open more, and when I looked back, it stopped. Fingers still there. I watched them until I think I fell asleep. 27, almost 28. There's a lot of exposition to this instance. Excuse me. I pumped and nursed for a little over a year for my son, born March 2024. I lost way too much weight and pushed myself to the brink of delusional exhaustion near the end. I also had this really bad habit of, when I did my final pump for the night, usually around midnight to 1 a.m., I'd prop myself up and fall asleep sitting up while I pumped. I would either set an alarm or my husband would wake me to go to bed when my pump stopped. And a few months ago, I busted my eyebrow open on a kettle latch at work, and I'm a vet tech, by the way. Mild concussion, probably could have used some stitches, but I decided to let it heal by, a scab. It ached from time to time, and one night, almost 2 weeks into my eyebrow healing, I was doing my usual final pump routine, and my husband was laying on the floor in front of me watching TV. Dead asleep, I shot awake because I felt my eyebrow rupture open and I felt blood gushing. I'm panicking, I'm trying to explain to him what's going on, and he finally gets calmed down enough to explain to me that nothing's going on. I calm down enough to finish my pump and we go to bed. Later in the night, our daughter comes running into her room and I scoop her up into my lap and rock her back to sleep, mostly asleep myself. Then all I could hear was this constant screaming, distant but also very close, and all I could think to myself was, why is there another little girl in my house and why is she screaming? What's going on? Who is the other little girl in my house? Except I couldn't move. I was just sitting crisscross on my bed, eyes closed, hunched over my sleeping daughter, cradled in my lap. I don't remember the screaming stopping, and I don't remember laying back down with my daughter beside me. The next night I asked my husband about it all, and he confirmed my eyebrow freak-out did actually happen. I explained to him how painful and real it had felt, and that I remembered it clearly, even though I wasn't really awake. I was also fully, intelligible and having conversations with him while I'm half asleep, and I won't remember the next day. Did it to my mom growing up too, so remembering of those instances is very rare for me. I then asked him about the screaming girl. He looked at me funny and said, "You mean our son's name?" He cried for a long time when, our daughter's name woke him up. It took me forever to get him back down. And I do want to add that... Jeez. And I do want to add that because of our work schedules, me being 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and him 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., he typically does the nighttime wakes-ups, and If it's both kids, I take our girl and he takes her boy, because our boy is a stage 10 clinger. And if he sees me, he won't go back to sleep. So my husband getting up for the kids instead of me is our norm. But I was very disoriented and put off by the fact that one, seemed to be having an episode while my child was crying that I couldn't come out of, and two, that I was so deep in it that I couldn't even recognize my own child's cries. Bullet point. I will not go upstairs alone. Either my husband or the dog has to go up there with me during daylight hours. I'll not go up there at night and I feel something in that staircase that I just can't describe. Like something calls me up there, but not benevolently. Because of this, our kids, now 3 and 1, share a room downstairs across the hall from us. Also, I just don't want my 3-year-old alone in a different level of the house than us. We're currently in the process of moving to a 1-story place that has enough rooms for everyone. These are all that I've experienced up to this point, and I'm hoping that with the new house and stopping nursing will allow me to get more sleep. Maybe decrease on the occurrences of sleep paralysis and exhaustion. I hope so. Little feet ran back and forth above my head while home alone. So I'll start by saying I was in high school when this happened. 2005 to 2006, and yeah, I'm pretty old. This happened on a weekend when I was home alone with a friend. It was me, he, and our cat. And we were all down in the basement chilling and just having some fun. Now, I believe in the paranormal and the unexplained. Did back then and still do now. But as a teenager, I didn't play with spirit boards or go searching for haunted things or places. But I still had paranormal experience happen to me nonetheless. Now I'll get back to the story. So, me and my friend were just chilling and watching YouTube or anime. Maybe drawing, who knows. But we got to talking about things that happened at school that day. When suddenly, we hear footsteps running back and forth upstairs above us. Mind you, we were in my house alone. My parents weren't there, and neither was my brother. So we both looked up at the ceiling, hearing running again. Looking at each other, my friend says, "Someone home?" I shook my head, stating that it was just us and the cat, I think. And the cat in question was with us on my bed sleeping, by the way. Slowly, we got up, and before heading out of the room, we heard it again. So, being curious and perhaps either brave or stupid, we investigated. The running sounded like a child, like a small putter-patter of feet running back and forth, and within my parents' room. Now, their room ran the width of the house. It was big, so you could imagine how much running this ghost and creature, whatever it was doing. And as we came up the stairs, the moment we hit the top floor, it stopped. Everything went silent. And once more, we just looked at each other in confusion. "Should we?" I said, pointing at my parents' room that my friend was skeptical about. We both heard the running of children's feet back and forth in the house, so we further investigated. And of course, there wasn't anything there. Nothing to explain what we heard or what it was that was running. And also, there were no small kids in my house. My brother and I were both in high school. Well, after about 10 minutes of searching, we shrugged and decided to leave the house and hit up the gas station for some snacks. We talked about it more when we got back, but never heard the running little feet again. Didn't hear the running ever again on my own either, but it was an experience I've never forgotten. Spooky, huh? A demon passed on by telling a story. So I want to clarify that this experience happened before my little footstep story. This happened when I was in middle school, so roughly 2002 to 2004. Not sure exactly when, but I was a bit younger. Also happened in the same house. this house I grew up in from grade 3 to graduation in high school, so plenty of stories to tell. Okay, now I will tell the story that I was told. The experience my current middle school boyfriend crush had happened to him. He had this happen to him because his friend told him their story, and now it was his turn to tell me his. So my friend told me that this cat, or what seemed like a cat, was in his room one night. He didn't own any cats, so it was confusing. But funny enough, when he got a good look at it, it didn't have fur and definitely had red eyes. Well, last night I had an experience that I will never really think I'd have happen to me. My cat Larry was a black female cat, was in my closet and just kind of sitting there staring out. He told me the eyes were like Larry's, yellowish green. So it was getting close to bedtime, and I know she likes to cuddle with me, so I went to pick her up. I called her name, did the whole pss, 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 pss. But she seemed comfortable where she was. But I wanted to cuddle her, so I reached out to pick her up, and she took a swing at me. And Larry wasn't an aggressive kitty, mind you. He had taken a breather, and he was quite shook, as one would be if their cat suddenly took a full clawed swing at them. But I don't think it was Larry. When she swung at me, the paw was larger than the claws. There was only 3, and they were big and jet black. Yeah, I know she is black too, but it wasn't fur I saw. Looked more like leather or hairless. Definitely not my girl. Anyways, I'd pulled my hand away fast, or I thought I did, but I got scratched before seeing one of the claws strike the floor. A little mad, I got up and went to bed, and I honestly thought I was dreaming. Didn't feel real. Well, come morning, when I was getting ready for school, I saw the scratch in my hand, and then last night came back to me. Checked my closet, and there was a small hole in the floor. Carpet bits beside it, but Larry wasn't in the closet. Apparently, she was sleeping with my parents, so I think I now know what it was. So he told me his friend's story after his, and I was highly intrigued by it all. But I clung in slowly, as I was now told a story about his cat creature and perhaps a demon. I mean, leatherish skin, 3 thick-toed claws, and color-changing eyes. And apparently, the tail was long and slender, much like a lizard's would maybe be. Some details are still fuzzy, but of course I remembered the story aspect. Kinda sticks with you. But hey, I've told this story many times, and so far it hasn't happened to anyone else. So now, I'll tell my part of the story for you. So after my friend told me all of this, it was a few days before I had my own experience with this creature. Now I lived with my parents, my brother, and we had one cat. One black one who was more my parents' cat than anything. So one night I'm asleep in bed when I hear a little growl. Now our cat didn't really growl at anything, so I stirred a bit hearing it, but a bit louder. Slowly walking, I sat up a bit and leaned over, reaching out to try to coax our cat over. And his name was Bandit. Bandit would always come when called, but this kitty, or what I thought was a kitty, didn't come. It was pitch black in the house, and all I saw was a faint outline from the outside light peeking underneath my window curtain. And this creature was larger, but not much bigger than a normal cat. Its eyes were staring at me, bright yellow with a tinge of red, as it growled once more at me. Its tail thumped and then it hissed at me. I don't remember the sound it made exactly, but it definitely wasn't a normal cat's hiss. Fed up, I just told the cat to go away, as I thought I, too, was just dreaming and seeing stuff. I fell back asleep till morning. But crazy enough, this I remember. After I pulled my blanket back up and rolled over, I felt something jump onto my bed and lay down. Okay, so yeah, I know this sounds crazy and possibly made up, but no, all of it's true. When I woke up the next morning, I asked my mom if she heard the growling sounds, and she did. I asked if Bandit was with her all night, and she said yes again. I left it at that, knowing it was real and not a dream or hallucination. Well, I told a friend the same story. She then had an experience. I don't know what happened after that, so far from time to time till this day, I'll still feel a phantom cat jumping up where I'm sleeping and lay down next to my feet. Hope you enjoyed my story. Don't worry, I don't think this demon kitty follows anyone anymore. I keep being lured by something in a local abandoned church. In my local area, there's a church, long since abandoned, left to rot. I've been inside it once, years ago. It left me with reoccurring surrealist nightmares about being trapped in it with a vicious, obvious hostile force, almost always resulting in my death before waking. Most commonly by throwing myself from the steeple, always waking either before that end or just as the force makes contact with me physically. Since then, any time I walk past it, I can feel something within me watching me. And more recently, any time I've been stood, just beyond its fencing, I can feel whatever it is beckoning me closer. It's hard to describe. It's been fine until today, when I stood beyond the fence for around 15 to 20 minutes before stalking around the property looking for a way in, almost as if compelled to get inside it. And even now I find myself looking at the corners on the wall of my home, distance away from it, and I figured out that the corner I'm looking is essentially the abandoned church. Just kind of wanted to type that. Not sure if anybody has any advice or conclusions which can be given without the specifics of the church and her location. Not sure if this is the right place for this, though, or with the right flair. I probably shouldn't give the specific church and location because it might narrow me down too, so all I can say is it's not that old compared to most churches in Britain, only around 100 years old. It's disused and boarded up with metal fencing keeping the general public away, and its graveyard removed around 3 years ago now. The Lost X-Files episode, and a man in white. Paranormal encounter that shook my reality. Complete summary of my unknown X-Files episode. One evening while watching TV, I came across a very strange episode of the X-Files. This episode was presented as a special, which immediately caught my attention. What was particularly odd was that it seemed to be linked to the Twilight Zone, a crossover that never actually existed. The episode began with an aerial shot of a deserted road, surrounded only with electric pylons, filmed as if by a drone. The camera slowly advanced down the road and a man's voice began to speak. Welcome to a special episode of the X-Files, linked to the fourth dimension. Tonight you will enter another dimension, an unknown and unexplained world filled with inexplicable phenomena. This episode is unique and special, and it will only be broadcast on this channel, nowhere else. Settle in and enjoy. Tonight, welcome to the fourth dimension, in connection with the X-Files. The atmosphere was already unsettling, and this feeling of strangeness intensified. The camera then rose to reveal a small town isolated in the middle of a desert. In the next scene, Scully arrived in this deserted town. She parked in the town center and got out of her car. It was nearby. And there was another car parked as well, carrying a family. A father, a mother, a boy about 9, and a 7-year-old girl. The family seemed disturbed, especially the father, who was telling his son to calm down. The family headed toward a store across from the phone booth where Scully was making a call to Mulder. During the call, Scully explained to Mulder that she had stopped in this small town for dinner and would return late that evening. Mulder talked about a recent case that they had investigated, but Scully has always remained skeptical about the paranormal conclusions. Mulder tried to convince her to be more open-minded. While on the phone, Scully noticed something odd. The family inside the store was acting strangely. She saw the father, and then in an instant he vanished. The mother then hurriedly exited the store with her children, but without the father. Intrigued, Scully cut off her conversation with Mulder and rushed toward the mother, asking her where her husband had gone. The mother, nervous, asked Scully to leave them alone, but as she placed her hands on Scully's shoulder, she suddenly whispered desperately, "Help us, please." Before she could say more, the boy insisted that they get back in the car. Scully got into her own car and decided to follow them discreetly. After about 15 minutes of driving, Scully arrived at the family's house. She got out of her car and knocked on the door. The mother opened it. Scully showed her FBI badge and explained that she was investigating paranormal phenomena. The mother, frightened, replied that everything was fine, and that Scully was just an old friend, to avoid alarming her son, who was watching from the doorway. But as soon as the door closed, the mother panicked and quickly whispered to Scully that her son wasn't normal, that he had terrifying powers. He confided that the boy had made his father disappear, and that she feared for her life and that of her daughters. The conversation took a dramatic turn when the boy suddenly appeared at the door and said to his mother, "That's not your friend, Mom. It's the lady we saw earlier." In a chilling tone, he ordered his mother to go inside the house, and instantly she obeyed as if controlled by an invisible force, while the boy added, "You lied to me. You will be punished." With a wave of his hand, he made his mother's mouth disappear, preventing her from speaking. Shocked, Scully tried to reason with the boy, but he forced her into the house. What followed was a disturbing scene. The boy's sister, concerned, asked what was happening, and furious, the boy made his little sister disappear with a snap of his fingers. The mother, in a panic, attempted to grab a weapon of some kind, probably to attack her own son, but before she could do anything, she also disappeared. Scully suddenly found herself transported to the boy's bedroom. He was sitting on his bed crying and confessing that he didn't want to hurt his family, but that he always felt rejected and unloved, and Scully tried to comfort him, explaining that his powers were extraordinary, but that he needed to use them for good. Finally, the boy stood up and opened a door that led to infinity, as if it opened to the universe itself. He stepped inside, leaving Scully alone in the room, and everything returned to normal. The house, the town, and everything around seemed restored as if nothing had happened, but the family had completely disappeared. Scully, still shaken and troubled, got back into her car, resumed her journey, and the episode ended. Well, that certainly was a description of an episode, and I almost remember that. I'm a little bit confused, though. A silhouette stared at me while I was sleeping. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, that you're sleeping at the house or somebody you know or a family member and have paranormal encounters. Well, once I went to the city to sleep at my uncle's house. I was with my cousin to spend the night playing board games. When night fell, we had to go to sleep. My cousin was going to sleep on the mattress on the floor, and I was going to sleep on the bed. The bedroom door was in front of the sort of right corner of the room, and you could see what was happening in the hallway at the time. I couldn't sleep that night, and I had insomnia. And when it was 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., I saw a silhouette passing by the door several times. And keep in mind, the door was half open, and you could see about 5 centimeters from the door in the wall. 15 minutes later, the same entity stopped and stared at me, and there was a heavy aura and an uncomfortable silence, the kind that you make your stomach turn with. The atmosphere was depressed, and its presence was paranormal. Later, when I was trying to stare at him and stay as still as possible without realizing it, I fell asleep. When it was morning, we were all awake in the house, but I didn't tell anybody about the story, which continues to haunt me to this day. and I'd like to know if any of you have had an event like the same or similar to this one. Weird paranormal activity keeps happening in my house. Some unusual things have been happening to me lately in my house, and I figure this might be a good place to discuss them. Let me give you a breakdown of everything. In August of last year, my grandmother passed away. It was devastating, but I've gotten better as time moved on. However, some creepy things keep happening in my house. I honestly have a difficult time trying to wrap my head around it. Now, I know this is going to sound like I'm making this up, and I don't have any photos or videos to back up what I'm going to say, but multiple members of my family have been experiencing creepy things as well, and I just need to share it with everybody here. 4 major events have happened to me, and I'll share them. I live in a 4-bedroom house, and there's 6 people, including me and 3 cats. And the first paranormal event happened when my siblings and I were talking to our mom about chores. And as the conversation was starting to become more argumentative, our Alexa out of nowhere started playing Baby Shark, which was strange since nobody in our conversation said any words, at least anything similar to the song that was playing. Also, what makes it more interesting is the fact that my grandmother used to play Baby Shark all the time for my baby cousin, either on her phone or the Alexa. It makes me believe that my grandma played that song to prevent an argument that was about to happen. The second event that happened was when I was working on my computer. I was completing college assignments, and I was at my desk in the living room, and as soon as I was finished writing a paragraph, I looked up and saw my back door randomly open. I know that door was closed because 10 minutes before it opened, my dad fully closed the door shut when he was bringing in laundry. My mom was also there. The third event happened when I was home alone. I got back from watching Goodfellas. I was at a friend's house. My family left to help my aunt prepare for her upcoming pregnancy. I was sitting at my desk watching some YouTube until I thought I heard something coming from the dining room. As soon as I looked over, the chair from my kitchen table was pulled out right in front of me. It wasn't any of my cats because one was sleeping on the couch and the other 2 were put away. And finally, the creepiest event is the kitchen light. The light in my kitchen is interesting, to say the least. The light bulb is just dying or almost dead, but it doesn't blink or anything until it does. My sister and I are cleaning the dishes one night until we start noticing the light blinking. The light's above the kitchen sink, and as a joke, my sister asked me to ask a question to the light. So I asked the cliché question, "Are you there?" The light stopped blinking and blinked twice. When that happened, my sister and I looked at each other and she asked me, "Did the light answer your question?" And after being shocked, I told the light to blink once for no and twice for yes. The light blinked 2 more times. I started asking it questions and the light was answering all my questions. My sister started becoming more uncomfortable and finished up the dishes. I was going to leave until I asked her to stay. I asked the light if it was here to talk to someone, and it blinked twice for yes. So we went down the list of names who the light wanted to see until he mentioned my dad. The light blinked twice for yes. My sister decided enough was enough. Went to bed, but before I left, I asked the light if it was somebody I used to know, and it said yeah. And the only name that came to my mind was Grandma, and I asked, "Grandma, is that you?" And the large light blinked twice. Now I don't know what I should do, whether I should ignore all of this or try something to do about it. But now what worries me is that if it's my grandma, like is she trying to communicate from beyond this world, or is it something more sinister? Help me make sense of the paranormal history of my late grandmother's house. So without further ado, Whether you're looking for a ghost story or looking to debunk some stuff, I'll start my account. I am a 20-year-old male, and this all started before I was born. I'll do my best to state the order of events chronologically. But these stories all come from different people in my family, so it might be a bit messy. My grandma has owned a trailer in Broomfield, Colorado for nearly 40 years. My father, his 2 brothers, and his 2 sisters grew up in this house. And me and my father also lived in this house with my grandma and grandpa later down the road. I'll give each story and account a name and an approximate date, as well as say who told me the story. 1985, Three-Fingered Lady. This one comes from my grandma, and at a separate point in time, my dad as well. My eldest uncle Ryan, when he was young, was just about 10 or 11. Had just got his own room, and he would tell my grandma about a 3-fingered lady in his closet that would talk to him at night. One night, my grandma heard banging on her door in the middle of the night and screaming. Opening the door, she found Ryan, who was screaming and crying with blood coming out of his leg. He told her the 3-fingered lady tried to drag me into the bed, tried to take me to hell. And after that night, they never heard about her again. Well, that's good. This one, at least, is a kind of distant layer of truth to it, because after his passing in the hospital 30 years later, I saw a scar in his leg and 3 lines going down to his calf. 1990. My favorite year. Open the door. This one comes from my grandpa. My grandma was a nurse, so she used to get home really late. And one night, my grandpa woke up to the doorknob on his bedroom door jiggling. He could hear my grandma saying, "John, let me in, the door's stuck." But when he opened it, my grandma wasn't on the other side. He looked down the hallway and didn't see my grandma anywhere. Coming back to bed, he said that my grandma was asleep next to him already. Year 2000. The Man in the Corner. This one also comes from my grandpa and my great-uncle Rick. It was late night, and Rick and John, my grandpa, were up late watching cable. John went to grab a beer, Rick went to take a piss, and on his way down the hallway after pissing, Rick passed who he thought was his grandpa, standing in the hall. He said, "The fuck are you doing, John?" Before continuing to the living room where John was drinking his beer. John said, "Who are you talking to?" Then they searched the whole house, but nobody was inside except the kids and my grandma, all a bit asleep. The year 2000 again. Moving furniture. This one comes from my dad and my youngest Aunt Jamie. Once every couple of months, upon returning home from days out, the family would find rooms, and one time the TV was knocked off the entertainment center broken. In 2005, The Face. From my brother's twin Aaron, I'd like to note that I was born this year, and I was the first grandchild of my family. My grandma once said that I was having grandchildren made the devil angry, or having grandchildren made the devil angry, because things got worse in the house after I was born. My uncle was homeless at the time, and my grandma let him stay on the couch, and apparently kept hearing breathing. Whenever he closed his eyes, he would see a face looking at him. 2007, The Seance. I've seen a video recording of this one, actually, and I'll be honest, I have no idea what's happening in the video. The recording's on a camcorder somewhere. My whole family decided to do a seance where they read the Bible and try to get rid of the demon in the house. In the video, you can see my family reading the Bible into a dark room, and I swear to God, you can hear growling come from the video. It's really weird, but maybe one of my family members made the noise, I don't know. A plate fell off a shelf in the video and breaks as well. 2007 and onward. Crosses fall off walls, people see things out of the corner of their eyes. People feel like stuff is clinging to their backs. Things move slightly and stuff breaks randomly. And my own personal experience. I've never seen anything overtly sinister happen in this house, but something strange has happened to me, and I rarely dream, almost never. When I do, it's always good. But there has never ever been a night that I stayed in that house that I didn't have a nightmare. They started when I was about 6. From then on, they only came back when I slept in that house. Also, I fully believe that my family believes that that house is haunted. Since I was a baby, I've been taught that, honesty is a core value, and my father's number one peeve is when, pretty much when I lie. I can't see my family lying about this stuff and keeping the lie up for decades, even though bad fallouts and arguments and everybody agreed that house was evil. I'm making that post because my grandma passed recently, and in her final hour she told us to take her somewhere else. She didn't want to die in that house. She refused. It's strange, but I'm sure it can be explained. If you have any questions or theories, please tell me. I want everything to be finally debunked. If you have nothing, enjoy the stories, I guess. See ya.
Join the Paranormal M community and embrace the mysterious. If you're eager to explore the realms of the supernatural, subscribing and turning on notifications is the key. Get ready for a thrilling adventure like no other. My college ghost story. It was around 1 a.m. on the weeknight of December. My roommate Jason, friend Jack, and girlfriend at the time, Vic, had all been hanging out. Being oddly warm for a winter night, around 60 degrees, we decided to take a walk around. On a limb, we tried the door to the FA building, and to our surprise, it was open. It was during the exam period. So we went in there and find that the door that led to the costume storage room, which was effectively a basement, was also unlocked. Curiosity got the best of us, and we headed down into the cold, cemented crypt. Except for Vic, she made the right choice. Upon reaching the bottom of the staircase, there was a long stretch of clothing on hangers that seemed to go on forever. When we looked to the side to see that the door was saying, "Keep shut at all times." Now obviously we were going to open the door. I mean, come on. So we opened the door and peeked in, just to see some pipes running across the top of a longer hall, a pile of logs to our right, and another door to our left. Unimpressed, we closed it and proceeded down to the end of the hall of hanging clothing. Underwhelmed to start and head back, but then my friend Jason made one last interjection. I kind of want to check that side room again. So we did, and as I'm holding the door that shouldn't be open, I realized something. Wait, nah, hell no. I've seen way too many horror movies to allow the door to slam shut behind me. Jason, grab me that piece of wood. Jason was just looking at me like an idiot, so I said it more aggressively. Jason, grab me that piece of wood. Like a deer in headlights, he didn't move, so I said it again. Jason, grab me that piece of... Suddenly, the side door flies open, and a gust of aggressive wind. We hear a slam in the distance, and then we fucking book it. And we get out, and Jason claims that he heard a girl's voice as he went up the stairs. Eager to share our findings with the group, we did just that, and returned the next night with a larger group. Scared as I was, I had my doubts about what happened and wanted to see if I could debunk this phenomenon. I checked the side door that flew open to realize that it didn't have a hatch that fully closed. So that was that. It was most likely just a draft coming from the wide open stage above that caused the door to open. I returned with relief, but was also kind of let down. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a ghost story of my own? Well, it turns out I would get exactly what I wished for. The next day I was on aid duty for my best friend and roommate Bryce. He's physically disabled, so he needs somebody to help him with everyday tasks. And we were chilling in his room after we had just told his dad about my adventure. Mid-conversation, we hear a faint 3-toned whistle. "Did you hear that?" Bryce asked. I assured him it was nothing but a bird or a gust of wind, but then it happened again. Bryce insisted that we get out of his room and head into the living room. I wasn't convinced it was anything out of the ordinary, but I didn't want him to be tweaking, so we did just that. We set up our computers and headphones and just got started on the work that we had been procrastinating about. I could tell Bryce was pissed at me, so I figured I should just keep my mouth shut and continue doing my work. The three-toned whistle returned right in my ear. I played back my music to double check. Only percussion. Reluctantly, I informed Bryce, to which he responded with full curiosity against his better judgment. Okay, that's it. If you're here, fucking whistle. 3, 2, 1. The three-toned whistle returned as if it was in the room with us. We booked it out of her dorm to the lobby. Soon our other roommate returned, confirming that it was not in his room. We knocked on neighbors' doors to test how well the whistle could travel. It wasn't audible. I have no explanation for what happened. The whistle happened a few more times that night, but never again after. I'm fairly certain I brought something back from the night prior, but I'm not sure what it could have been trying to tell me. Story about my childhood at my stepfamily's house in North Carolina. I live in New York with my mom while my dad moved to North Carolina with his new wife, and the house that they live in is supposedly haunted by spirits that follow my oldest stepbrother. Now, lucky me, I've never actually seen these spirits with my eyes, but I have felt and heard them. I visit each summer, and a situation I even wanted to talk to you all about was this one time where me and my stepbrother, Ellie, were home alone while my other stepbro named Gabriel was at school. It was midday and sunny out when I decided to go upstairs and grab my PS Vita. But as I was walking up the stairs, I heard something from the attic that sounded like Gabriel screaming, saying, "Ellie, Ellie, help me." And I froze and had never been that scared in my life. Something kept me from even talking to another, since the scream was coming from directly above me. I looked down at Ellie, who was under the stairs on the couch watching TV, and asked if he had heard Gabriel. He said, "Fuck that, bro," and just started running out of the house, and I followed him like the brave hero I am. But no joke, that was by far the most I've ever felt fear in my life. Whatever was talking to us, or I guess talking to Ellie, sounded evil, even though it was talking in Gabriel's voice. The school they went to was about an hour bus ride, so Gabriel didn't get home until 4:30-ish. And of course we told him about it, and he thought that we were all crazy, but I would see him run to the bathroom at night sometimes. But anyways, the most I've ever seen up until that point was a door closing on its own while we were playing Smash or something on the 3DS. And another time at night I felt a blanket pulled or tugged off me, but this time was different. That voice, hearing that desperation in its voice yelling for us, still sends chills down my spine. If any of you ever heard of these stories, or things like it, what would be, maybe mine look kind of lame in comparison, especially my oldest stepbrother. Weird experience. I was around 5 to 7 years old at the time. It was in the summertime, so school was out. I slept in to about 10 or 11 a.m. because I had stayed up from playing video games. I also have to mention that I was home alone. My brother and Ma had gone grocery shopping. I was used to this, and I knew what I would do, since I was independent, even though I was so young. Even though my ma and brother were out, I had no idea that I was alone. The very first thing on my mind as soon as I woke up was to hop on the game and get ahead. One of our gaming systems was set up in my brother's room, so I walked down the hallway towards his room, hoping that he wouldn't be playing on it. Now, my brother's room is right next to my ma's room, so you can see a little bit into it if you were sitting in the chair while playing on his gaming system. So as I approached his room, I saw in the corner of my eye my brother peering in the doorway of my ma's room. I didn't really full-on look at him because I was walking fast and all I had in my mind was wanting to play this game. I just said, "Hey, since you're in Ma's room already, I'm going to go play on your gaming console if that's okay with you." He didn't answer, but I just ignored it and got comfortable in the chair and waited for the system to boot up. As I was sitting there, my brother continued to be in the doorway of my Ma's room from the corner of my eye. I finally started getting an uneasy feeling because from the corner of my eyes, my brother just seemed off. His face was covered in a shadow and the whole doorway was also super dark as well. His body was visible though. It was just his face that was shadowed out. I couldn't make out his face at all, so I finally decided to look at him to question what the heck he was doing. When I did, he vanished. I was super confused at first and then yelled out to him. No answer. Then I yelled out to my ma. No answer again. So I yelled out for both of them. No answer. I soon got a super creepy feeling that someone was watching me, and I quietly got up from my seat, turned the console off, put away the game, and then walked out of the house. I waited on the porch until my brother and my mom came home. My mom was puzzled why I was on the porch in just my pajamas, and I just said something scared me in the house. My mom looked everywhere in the house, but there was nothing. I will admit the house did give me the creeps at times, and that's the only moment where I can't fully explain what I experienced. Just wanted to share this because everyone I've told this to finds it interesting that a skeptic like me also might have experienced something. Also, further context of the house. Apparently a little girl had died in that house. There isn't anything about that little boy that maybe possibly passed away in my old house. So I really don't know what I saw. Also, me and my brother's friends would refuse to sleep over at my house because they thought it was super scary at night. But this happened during the day, so I really can't explain it besides my wild imagination of my mind when I was 5 or 7 years old. Demon Dog of San Bernardino. It was the summer of 2006, and at the time I'm a 14-year-old little troublemaker, skipping school, smoking copious amounts of weed, tagging up walls, all that. That day I was caught in the back smoking weed by the school's police. They confiscate my weed, throw my joint on the floor, and then give it a hefty ticket and a court date. I shrug it off, acting like a tough guy, so I skipped school, walked home that day, trying to think of what I'm going to tell my mom or my old man. Slowly, hour by hour, just panicking, thinking, man, I'm going to get my butt kicked that night. On the verge of an anxiety attack, I leave my house at 1 a.m. I walk around wandering the street with my marker in hand, of course, tagging and just trying to distract myself. I say, let me go down to the street and see if the liquor store is still open. And guys, I kid you not, I always have my head on a swivel. I looked in that direction multiple times. I was walking toward the liquor store, and out of nowhere, from behind a streetlight, the strangest, ugliest, most menacing dog I've ever seen in my life. Its coat, its demeanor, its presence. I've never ever experienced that with a dog. Looked like a mastiff or a Rottweiler and a boxer had a baby, and just there in the light staring at me. Waiting for me to get an inch closer, I stop in full panic mode. I run across the street, not looking both ways, and then my panic is broken when the lights of a police car shine upon me and the officer parks, gets out of his car, and proceeds to chase me. And when I finally stopped, I was asked, "Why are you running?" I said, "Didn't you see the massive dog underneath the light?" She said, "What dog? There's nothing there." Till this day, people suggest that this was maybe some sort of evil spirit. Some say it's probably protecting you, but whatever it is, sure gave me a fright. Possession moment? I give the title that name because you can let me know what you think after this story. Over the weekend, I went to a museum full of haunted objects. At this museum, you could rent spirit boxes, and the guy in front of me and my friend had one. So while we were downstairs in the basement of the museum, with their most haunted objects, we went into this room with a doll chained up. You had to ask permission to see the doll before entering, and I missed the sign. I instantly felt nauseous and my vision was super weird and blurry. All of a sudden, the guy's spirit box said something, and it said, Paige? What does that mean? And I was like, my name is Paige. My friend and I left right away because I didn't feel right at all. I had a very similar experience with the real-life Annabelle 2 years ago. There wasn't a spirit box there that said my name during that time. So crazy to think that it actually happened. For those wondering about my Annabelle experience, I went to see Annabelle 2 years ago, and I asked for permission to take her photo. I looked directly in her eyes when asking, and I can't explain the feeling I got when I asked. It felt so demonic, but yet I still decided to take the photo. Multiples. I ended up getting sick, to the point where it felt like my body was literally shutting down. No matter what I did, nothing helped. I went to the hospital, which is crazy for me in general because I never go to the doctors. They couldn't find anything wrong. I'll never forget that experience because whatever entities attached to Annabelle took over me. It took me weeks to get over. And now I hope I never come across her again. A bucket list item leading to absolute terror. Floating specter on my local park. Interested in what you people think. I live in a relatively rural town in the UK, so it isn't considered too unnatural to go out late at night and walk around the area as a teen. When I was 16, I began struggling with a rough bout of depression, meaning I often couldn't sleep at night. Therefore, a late night walk to clear my head was a common activity of mine. I did this often, and despite the occasional drunk stumbling home from town or a rambling junkie, I never experienced anything that put me off from going on walks. This was until I experienced one of the very completely unexplainable moments in my life. One evening, I was laid in bed watching YouTube, and as usual, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to do a quick walk around the block. It was late spring, so I wasn't apprehensive about any bad weather. I planned to walk around the area and finish the walk by going through the park at the top of the street. For context, the park has an alley-like entrance at the top of my street, and then another entrance on the other side that connects to the main road. I did my usual walk through the suburbs. Nothing unusual happened, of course. And as usual, I ended up at this top entrance by the main road. I walked down the path at the roadside entrance, opening out to the park's big field. The park was completely pitch black. The only light was sort of from the entrance of the alleyway, up at the top of the park. As I looked across the park toward the alleyway, I noticed underneath the lamplight stood a thin black silhouette, moving side to side in an unnatural floating, swaying motion. I stood there frozen in absolute terror, and anyone who's ever felt that type of impending danger or fear will know the paralyzing feeling you get in that situation. Focusing my eyes on it, I noticed it slowly sloping toward me, still doing this floaty, swaying motion. The only thing I can compare the movement to is the scene in that first Harry Potter movie, in which Harry encounters a hooded figure drinking unicorn's blood that almost slinks towards him like a snake. I must have stared at it for 10 minutes, unable to move before I got the courage to slowly back out of the park. All the while not breaking eye contact, mind you. I then decided to take a lit-up the suburbs route home. I now go to university in Liverpool, yet when I come home for summer, I never go on late-night walks anymore. But I am interested in what people could think it could have been, as I've never seen anything like it since. I'm completely against the idea of it being a person at all, as the motion simply wasn't human. Whether it was an animal casting a strange shadow under the light, or maybe even the shadow of a bush of maybe discarded trash, this moment still creeps me out to this day. My ghost story from when I was a teenager. So I was around 17 or 18 at the time, and I slept in the basement of a house I grew up in. I had a mattress there, and I would sleep in front of our dryer, with the mattress pointed away from the dryer and my pillow on the end farthest from the dryer. Nothing spooky or weird had ever happened in this house in the time I grew up there before this story. I should add that when I slept, it was pitch black in the room, because being a basement, there really wasn't anything or anywhere for light to get in from. It was so dark that even after your eyes adjusted, you still couldn't see a foot in front of you. I never had a problem with that since I slept well that way. Anyhow, one night I'm snoozing away, and sometime very late in the night, I suddenly awoke to see something standing in front of the dryer, and my feet. A transparent woman dressed in an old-style clothing, like something from the Old West, long skirt, button-down shirt of some sort, and hair pulled back in a bun. She was holding what looked like a modern laundry basket, and as I laid there for a couple of seconds trying to understand what was going on, she suddenly emptied the laundry basket by tilting it forward towards me. Out of it fell a waterfall of transparent laundry, which I couldn't see clearly since it was bunched up like laundry usually is. At this point, maybe 4 to 5 seconds into the incident, I jumped backwards off the mattress and crashed into a bunch of cardboard boxes filled with household items my parents stored in the basement. To say I was scared is a major understatement. The crashing around that I did woke the whole rest of my family, who turned on the basement light to see what was making all the noise. At this point, the woman had vanished and I was completely alone. This incident shook me pretty good, as I'd always been a skeptic of the existence of spirits and ghosts. An Airbnb experience I'll never forget. The city has been suffocating me. The constant noise, the never-ending hustle, and the relentless pressure. They were all taking a toll on my mental health. I was just 32, but I felt decades older, so I decided to escape to a place where silence was the loudest noise, where the pace of life was dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. I found a quaint little Airbnb in the countryside, an idyllic log cabin surrounded by acres of dense woods far away from the maddening crowd. To be honest, it seemed like a dream, but little did I know it was a nightmare in disguise. Upon my arrival, the cabin appeared as charming as the pictures, rustic, isolated, and peaceful, but as the sun began to set, the cabin started revealing its true colors. At first, it was the little things, the way the wooden floor creaked under my feet, even when I was standing still, the peculiar smell that lingered in the air, sweet yet metallic, the way the wind howled through the trees, almost like a mournful cry. Then I started noticing the oddities. The mirrors in the cabin didn't reflect my image correctly. My reflection was always slightly delayed, as if it were another person mimicking my movements. The paintings on the walls seemed to shift when I looked away, their subjects twisting into grotesque figures. As the night fell, I heard whispers, soft, eerie whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. They spoke of sorrow, of loss, and of something darker that I dared not contemplate. Then came the figure. Every night at the stroke of midnight, I could see it in the window, a silhouette standing in the woods, watching. It was always there, unmoving, just watching. Despite the terror that gripped me, I couldn't bring myself to leave. It was as if the cabin had ensnared me in its eerie charm. Every day I would tell myself, oh my God, I'm leaving tomorrow. But when tomorrow came, I found myself drawn further into the mystery of the cabin. What is this place? What secrets does it hold? Why does it not let me go? The questions consumed me, fueling my curiosity and fear in equal measure, but I was determined to uncover the truth or be consumed by it. Days turned into weeks. I found myself weirdly drawn deeper into the hypnotic rhythm of the cabin. The whispers grew louder, the figure in the woods seemed closer, and the cabin's oddities became more pronounced. One day I found a trap door under a worn-out rug. It led to a basement I hadn't known existed. The air was damp, filled with the scent of old earth and something else. The smell that made my stomach churn was the same sweet yet metallic smell I'd noticed when I first arrived. In the dim light, I could see something etched into the stone walls. Symbols, old and unfamiliar, crisscrossed the surface in a pattern that made my head spin. The same symbols were carved into a wooden pedestal at the center of the room, upon which sat an old leather-bound book. As I approached the book, the whispers grew into a cacophony. I could hear distinct words, now a chant, repeating the same phrase over and over. I couldn't understand it, but I felt a pull, compulsion to open the book. With trembling hands, I opened it. The pages were yellowed with age, covered in the same symbols from the walls. But there in the middle of the book was a picture that made my blood run cold. It was a cabin, and standing by the window was a figure. The same figure I saw every night. But in the book, the figure wasn't outside the cabin, it was inside, staring directly at me. I recoiled in horror, dropping the book. The room plunged into silence. I could feel a presence behind me. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what I knew was there, but I had to. I turned. I turned around, and there it was, the figure. It was no longer a silhouette, but a clear, ghastly apparition. It was as if someone had taken a snapshot of despair and molded it into a humanoid shape. He reached out for me with a hand that was both there and not there. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I was a statue, a prisoner of my own fear. The apparition's hand touched my face. It was ice cold, yet it burned. As it did, I felt a wave of emotions flood into me. Sadness, anger, fear, despair. These weren't my emotions. They were its. Suddenly I was somewhere else. I was still in the cabin, but it was different. Alive, filled with people. I was seeing through someone else's eyes, feeling their emotions, living their memories. I was the apparition. I saw the cabin as it was, not a building, but a prison, a place of punishment for those who dared to challenge the natural order. The apparition, I realized, was not a ghost, but a prisoner trapped in the cabin for an eternity. Memories became darker, filled with pain and sorrow. I felt every moment of the apparition's loneliness, every second of its despair. It was too much. I screamed, or at least I thought I did. The next thing I knew, I was back in the basement, the apparition gone. I left the cabin the next morning. As I walked away, I could still feel its gaze on me. But it was different. It was no longer a gaze of menace, but of gratitude. I had shared its pain and solitude. I had given it something it hadn't had in a long time: company. As I left, I glanced back one last time. There in the window stood the figure, watching me leave, but this time it wasn't alone. Standing next to it was another figure, a familiar one. It was me. I had left the cabin, but a part of me would always remain trapped in the eerie solitude, forever sharing the cabin's haunting secret. A girl from school is in a cult, and I slept at her place. It was creepy. I'm going to call this girl Lily for now. She was in my class, and I was her only friend. I'm a pagan, and I respect everybody's beliefs. She told me she's Christian, and of course, I didn't have a problem with it, since before I converted, I was Christian too. But at this point, I had no idea that she was in fact a Christian cult that believes that there are a salve to God and to take orders from him. Or I believe they meant slave. From him, I made some research about this cult and found out that they in fact think God is actively talking to them in their head, and that they are just like robots fulfilling his wishes. Anyways, back to the story. She invited me to her birthday party to sleep over, and she lived about 2 hours away from me by bus. As soon as I arrived, I already had a weird feeling, but I brushed it off and ignored it. They had a huge Jesus hanging on their walls outside of the house. The statue was about 5 meters big, and when I entered the house, the first thing I saw was a huge altar, but But that didn't bother me since I have an altar too. For my own work. As I said, I'm a pagan and I'm very open to everything. The afternoon went very well. I was talking with their family, which were very nice people, until we started to eat. They started praying to God and I didn't, since I'm not Christian. When they realized I wasn't praying with them, they forced me to do so. So I did, since I didn't want to come off as rude, and at this point I was already scared and felt very uncomfortable in this house. We went to bed, and in her room she had a glass wall with a glass door which led to the balcony. I really did try to sleep, but I kept waking up hearing weird noises, almost like footsteps on the roof. I went outside the balcony because I thought it was maybe me being stupid, and I looked down and I swear there was something behind the tree. I saw it moving. It was a shadow. At this point, I just wanted to go home, but there were no buses driving at night, so I had to stay there. This night was an absolute nightmare. After 10 minutes of staying outside the balcony, I saw her. A witch. Like a pastor outside doing some weird shit. I didn't even know what it was, but as soon as he saw me, he told me to immediately go inside, so I did. Absolutely scared, I drew a protection rune on my arm, which really hurt on my skin. I can still see the injury when I tried to go to bed again. I saw that shadow on the fucking balcony. Lily's still asleep. The Das came in the room, and as soon as he entered, the shadow was gone, but he had this weird energy around him. We had this conversation, why I shouldn't go in the balcony. It's cold, it's dark. I should be asleep. It was summer and it really wasn't cold though. I stayed awake for the rest of the night after that, and I broke contact with Lily. But since that happened, I keep waking up to scratches on my arm. The man in the cowboy hat. When I was roughly 18 years old, I spent a lot of time at my best friend's house just outside the suburbs in Toronto, Ontario. One night a group of us was heading out to the bar. There were about 5 of us in total. We were all in the house together before heading out. My best friend and I had been there most of the day, and no one else in the house but us. At around 10 p.m. we all headed out to the car and piled into a Pontiac Sunfire. I was in the passenger seat, my girlfriend was driving, and 3 people were in the back seat. The front of the house was mostly windows, including some blurred glass on the door and very few places without glass of some kind. As we were backing out, I looked up and watched a dark, featureless man in what looked to be a cowboy hat walk from the left out of the house, coming from where the stairs to the basement were to the front door, only to disappear before the window to the den. There was maybe 4 feet of wall before the next window, and he was just gone. At first I was stunned, but I managed to say, "Did anyone else see?" Without missing a beat, the girl sitting in the middle seat behind me said, "The man in the cowboy hat." I was amazed when someone else used the expression, "Looks like you've seen a ghost." That was the look on her face, like a mixture of fear and excitement, just enough to make you nauseous. My best friend seemed less surprised. It was a family house and the property going back for generations. There was a chandelier above the basement stairs that his father told us dated back a few hundred years and was converted to electricity a long time ago. The area the man came from was the basement stairs. Only we realized after that we saw him that there was no way that he could have been walking from where he was walking. There were stairs and his height didn't change. After a few minutes of trepidation, we all went back into the house together. We searched everywhere for the man, and I mean everywhere. If there was a man living in the walls, we needed to find out. All the doors were closed and locked. All the windows were closed and locked too. There was nobody else there. To this day, I have zero doubt that we saw some sort of paranormal entity. My best friend mentioned his grandfather, and we did ask his dad, but we still don't know for sure who or what it was. The fact that the 2 of us saw the exact same thing at the exact same time made it extraordinary. It made me feel a bit less crazy. The Man in the Cowboy Hat. When I was roughly 18 years old, I spent a lot of time at my best friend's house, just outside the suburbs of Toronto, Ontario. One night, a group of us was heading out to the bar. There was 5 of us in total, and we were all in the house together before heading out. My best friend and I had been there most of the day, and no one else was in the house but us. At around 10 p.m., we all headed out to the car and piled into a Pontiac Sunfire. I was in the passenger seat, my girlfriend was driving, and 3 people were in the back seat. The front of the house was mostly windows, including some blurred glass on the door and a very few places without glass of some kind. As we were backing out, I look up and watched a dark, featureless man in what looked to be a cowboy hat walk from the left of the house, coming from where the stairs to the basement were, to the front door, only to disappear before the window to the den. There was maybe 4 feet of wall before the next window, and he was just gone. At first I was stunned, but I managed to say, "Did anyone else see?" Without missing a beat, the girl sitting in the middle seat behind me said, "The man in the cowboy hat." I was amazed when someone used the expression, "Looks like you've seen a ghost." That was the look on her face, like a mixture of fear and excitement, just enough to make you nauseous. My best friend seemed less surprised. It was a family house and the property going back for generations. There was a chandelier above the basement stairs that his father told us dated back a few hundred years, and it was converted to electricity a long time ago. The area the man came from was the basement stairs, only we realized after that we saw him that there was no way that he could have been walking from where he was walking from. There were stairs and his height didn't change. After a few minutes of trepidation, we all went back into the house together. We searched everywhere for the man, and I mean everywhere. If there was a man living in the walls, we needed to find out. All the doors were closed and locked. All the windows were closed and locked, and there was nobody else there. Till this day, I have zero doubt that we saw some sort of paranormal entity. My best friend mentioned his grandfather, and we asked his dad, but we still didn't know for sure who or what it was. The fact that the 2 of us saw the exact same thing at the exact same time made it extraordinary and made me feel a bit less crazy. Visited by a Wraith. Back in around 2005, I was on a family vacation in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We stayed in a cabin in the mountains. 2 bedrooms downstairs and a loft bedroom upstairs. The loft was enclosed but had a large bifold window that could be opened to overlook the open living room below. I claimed the loft for myself. One night I'd gone to bed before everyone else. The bifold window was closed, but the light from the living room leaked through the cracks. I put my headphones on, popped my Avril Lavigne CD into my Discman, and laid down in bed. I was on my back, eyes closed, and fumbled around with the CD player trying to change songs. I couldn't quite get it, so I opened my eyes to try to see where the button was. When I did, there was nothing but darkness. I was confused because the light from the window was gone and the room was pitch black. I suddenly realized something was covering my eyes because it began moving away from me, revealing the edges of its body in the light from the window. I stared, frozen, as this creature flew back, ending in the upper corner of the bedroom, and started disappearing into the shadows. I pulled the sheets over my head, crushed my eyes closed, and turned up the volume as loud as it would go. I ended up passing out like that for the night. The next morning, I was telling my mom what happened. She tells me that she also had a strange experience that morning. She was sitting on the edge of her bed putting socks on when one of the dresser drawer handles, styled like a door locker, started lifting and dropping against the dresser. She watched it continue for a minute before reaching over and holding it down. Then another started doing it, so she held that one down as well. When a third one started going, she bolted out of the room. Several years later, I was relaying this story to my new friend, and his response to the creature's physical description was, "Sounds like a wraith." And I admittedly didn't know what that thing was. I grew up in a house with a lot of ghost activity, so anything remotely spooky was not of interest to me. He pulled up an image to show me, and instantly tears were rolling down my face. Not sad, just my body's response, which felt weird to me. It was exactly what I had seen that night. This is gonna sound really dumb. I'm currently house or cat sitting for a friend who had to go out of town for a family emergency. She asked me, as I often spend time at her place and her cat's comfortable with me. When she told me I was going to be a few days, I packed a bag. It wasn't much, just a change of clothes and toiletries that included my toothbrush and a bottle of Listerine mouthwash. On the night I arrived, I put all my stuff away, my toothbrush and the mouthwash. I put on top of the bathroom cabinet, out of reach of her cat. Before I went to bed, I remember using the mouthwash. I poured some into the cap, knocked it back, and put the cap back on and put the bottle atop the cabinet. I rinsed, turned off all the lights in the place, made sure that the cat was okay, and then went to bed. Next morning, I wake up around 8 to feed the cat. And as I'm walking past the bathroom, I noticed the Listerine is missing from atop the cabinet. My first thought was that the cat might have leapt up during the night and knocked it off. But scanning the bathroom floor revealed that this wasn't the case. I searched around the house thinking maybe I'd randomly placed it somewhere else without realizing, but no. The bottle has completely disappeared into the ether. I'm going home tomorrow and I'm thinking about maybe not telling my friend about it. How am I going to say I've lost an almost full bottle of mouthwash in your house? I spoke to a mutual friend of ours about it, and she said that she always found this house to be creepy, and on one occasion her and her friend heard a voice upstairs. So my question is this: if ghosts are real, do they do this kind of thing? If so, where the heck would they stash a bottle of mouthwash? Reading about what I was sure was a dream, a flying head wreathed in flame. One night when I was young, about 10 years old, I awoke to notice I was being watched through my window by what appeared to be an old man's face. I remember being paralyzed with fear and staring at it, and also pretending to be asleep. It looked like an old white man's face angrily staring at me, but I also remember thinking maybe it's Frost. Now here's where it gets weird. After staring in fear for what seemed like forever, it just locked eyes. And I locked eyes with this thing. I finally mustered the courage to jump up and run to my mom's room. I burst in there and remember disturbing her, and I got into her bed, and she went downstairs for something, and I can't really remember. Next thing I do remember is my head rising from the foot of the bed, and then the whole room was on fire. The fire started slowly as just around the head, and then completely surrounding the bed. It spoke a bunch of horrific words for a moment, and then when my mom came back in the room, the whole scene vanished. I only post this now because I've actually seen so many similar accounts on here of this thing. Anyone else have this thing show up? I've also had a life of lucid dreaming and some bouts of sleep paralysis. I can certainly feel things on people sometimes. When someone is really negative, I can feel it when they enter a room like a dark cloud billowing out with them. My grandfather's ex-girlfriend wasn't human. Back in 1970, when my grandpa was 18, he was dating this girl who was a year younger than him for over a year. We're going to call this girl S. S was beautiful, sweet, kind, and easy on the eyes, according to him. When summer started, S invited him to her parents' house in the province. S was currently staying with her aunt while she went to school in my grandpa's town. My grandpa was skeptical at first because the area that S lived in was quite rural and would take 5 hours to arrive by bus. But Grandpa was infatuated with S, so he said, what the hell, why not? So with permission from his parents, he packed up, and he and S were on their way. When they arrived at her hometown, he noticed a lot of people were staring at them. It was a small town, so the population wasn't that big. S showed him around where the shops were, the diners, etc. But Grandpa would notice people staring at them. The one time he heard a couple whisper, "aswang." If you're wondering what the hell an aswang is, in Filipino folklore, an aswang is a malevolent, shape-shifting, flesh-eating monster. From what I learned by the day, that they look and act like normal people. However, at night, they reveal their true selves. Back to the story. So S and Grandpa arrive at S's house. It was a large 3-story wooden home. Grandpa then met S's parents. They greeted him warmly and invited him in, and exchanged talks over dinner. Grandpa said that they seemed like a couple of nice normal people. On the first night, he was sleeping in S's room on the second floor. Grandpa woke up hearing a strange noise. The first thing he noticed was that S was gone. He assumed that she must have went to the bathroom, so he lied down again. But the weird sound continued. It was coming from the floor above. He said that it sounded like cats scratching its claws on the wooden floor, accompanied by what sounded like a person mumbling. He tried to ignore it, but it started getting louder until he could hear multiple clawing noises from above, like multiple cats scratching on the wooden floors as well as mumbling. S still hasn't come back at this point, which made him worry. But when he heard loud thumping from upstairs like a person jumping, Grandpa's really weirded out at this point, so he covers his ears with his pillow. The next day, he told S that their cats were really loud and that he couldn't sleep. S just looked at him confused and said, "We don't have cats." "Huh? That's weird. I could have sworn I heard cats last night," he said. On the second night, he was woken up again by the same sounds. He said at that point he was thinking, "What the bleep?" Then he hears loud grunting from above, like an animal in pain. He tries to go back to sleep, but then he's startled by what sounded like a roar. This continues for another day, until on the fourth night, Grandpa decided he had had enough. He was gonna man up, march upstairs, and see what the hell was going on. So it was around 1 in the morning, according to him, and he said it was strange because he didn't hear any more of the weird sounds, but he decided to go upstairs anyway. He tiptoed across the floor and reached the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. Once he reached the 3rd floor, he notices something weird. The lights wouldn't work, even though they were working fine before he went to bed. The only source of light was the moonlight, which illuminated the interior. He makes his way to the room that was above him on the 2nd floor where the sounds were coming from, and what he saw made the hair on his back of his neck stand up. The floor was littered with claw marks. The windows were wide open, and there were blood stains across the floor. There were no signs of S or her parents anywhere. Freaked out, he went back down to the 2nd floor, but then his nose caught a whiff of something he hadn't noticed before. It was coming from the kitchen. Curious, he went to go take a look, but it was so dark that he could barely make anything out. As he walked, his hand touched something that felt like a large metal pot. He opened the lid. A great number of flies escaped, and his nose was assaulted, an extremely awful, putrid smell that he said nearly made him vomit. It was so dark that he couldn't see what was inside the pot, so he immediately slammed down the lid and ran back to the room and forced himself to sleep. The next day, during lunch, S's mother served dinuguan, animal blood that's been cooked and mixed with herbs and spices. But my grandpa excused himself and lied that he was sick. He didn't want to know what was in the food. S's mother tried to coax him to eat, saying that he'll regain his energy. This is when Grandpa takes the opportunity to find out the truth. You see, in folklore, to identify whether or not a person is an aswang is quite simple. Observe their eyes. If your reflection is upside down, then they're an aswang. Grandpa stared at S's mom's eyes and reeled back in horror. His reflection was upside down. This is when the mom's expression completely changes. She went from concerned to angry and was glaring hard at Grandpa an expression that basically says, according to him, "You shouldn't have done that." That night, Grandpa didn't waste any time and immediately packs up and heads home, lying that there's been a family emergency in order for him to go. He finally returns home and spent a lot of time inside his house in complete fear. The following month, he breaks up with S. She looked at him in sadness and said that she understands. That was a wise choice for him, but it was quite a shame, huh? Grandpa ended the story. He said that it was a huge shame indeed because he really wanted to marry S. This has stayed with me 10 plus years, and it still sends shivers down my spine. Years ago, I lived in a cabin with my husband and young child, 3 years old, and one dog. The layout of the house plays a role. The front door led to the living room, and there was a small hallway that led to the kitchen and our kids' room off to the right. In the hallway, there was a bathroom. In the main bedroom, off of that, our dog used to sleep in the hallway. It was late and my husband and kid were sleeping. I had been in the living room watching TV, but I heard a noise, like a whine or like I was being called, and it made me jump. It was weird. It was sounding like my kid, but not really. But at that point, I had just assumed it was her, so I had walked down the hallway with the dog. And the dog was sitting up staring at my kid's room. So I stepped around her and walked over to my kid's room. My child was sitting straight up, looking straight, not making a noise. I laid her back down and went toward the living room. Again, I heard the same odd, hard-to-describe noise. Walked back down to her room. Again, the same thing. The dog looked on edge as well. I stayed up for a little while to make sure that she had gone back to sleep and to get the dog to relax. I eventually went into the bedroom and laid down. Still, my ears were on high alert given the circumstances. I laid there for a while trying to sleep, but it seemed like something was stopping me from relaxing enough to actually fall asleep. I tossed and turned a bit. I had been laying on my right side facing my closet, and when I rolled back onto my back, I saw something that has forever stayed with me. I legit see it so clearly as I write this. At the end of my bed stood a small boy, probably 7 or 8. My eyes literally couldn't blink. I was shocked but not terrified like most would think. I was bewildered because I could see him clear as day. Young boy with a hat, tannish clothes with suspenders. I swear on everything that he said, I turned away, because now I thought I was losing my mind. Not only could I see him clear as day, but now I could hear him speaking. It sounded like help. I rolled back toward the closet and closed my eyes real tight, and I was hoping he'd disappear. But nope, I was wrong. When I opened my eyes, he was now standing directly in front of my face. Like I said, he was like 7'8", so his face was right in front of mine when I opened my eyes. While looking this boy straight in the face, he said something, and all I could think of was the TV shows that say all you have to do is tell them to leave, and it's okay to move on. So I had reopened my eyes, hoping he was gone, and as I went to say, it's okay to pass on, and to please leave my home, I got 99% of it out and said the last word. I clearly heard him, and I watched him raise his hand slightly. And so, wait. When I blinked, he was gone. Scared shitless, I got up, checked my kid's room. She was fast asleep. My dog was relaxed, now asleep in the hallway, and nothing seemed weird anymore. I laid back down, freaked out, thinking I was going crazy. At some point, I fell asleep. The next day, I told my husband and best friend. My boyfriend was completely taken aback by how out of this world it was. And my husband was shocked that he didn't hear anything while it was happening. The image of this boy has stayed with me ever since. I Googled the property that I was living in at that point to see if any children who looked like him had gone missing and never really uncovered anything shady. The property was at the location of a war that was fought. And there were a couple youngins who had gone missing, but nothing concrete. I've had random odd things happen, like feeling someone run in my head from behind this. This is something that's always stayed with me. His face is just as detailed today as it was over a decade ago. The man in my nursery. My mom has always been able to see ghosts and spirits. She has many different experiences, both good and bad. This has always made me a firm believer in ghosts. I can't see ghosts, though I've always had a very good sense of what many people would consider vibes and such. Whether it be from a person or just from being in the house. One day, a few months after I was born, I had finally been placed into a different room than my parents. My mom got up in the middle of the night to go get some water. She didn't know exactly why she woke up so suddenly, but pushed it off as maybe not being a big deal as she, just wandered into the kitchen. When she got into the kitchen, she had her glass of water, and she seemed like out of the corner of her eye, she saw a sort of figure, and it was walking into my room. My mother, of course, decided to follow this said figure. She didn't know whether she had just been imagining it, or maybe she wasn't going to risk it. When she was walked to my room, she could hear giggling coming from inside. Once she gets into my room, she notices the figure standing next to my crib with a smile. It was an old man wearing large glasses. The man notices my mom in the doorway and nods slightly before walking out the door of my crib without a sound. My mom stands there for a second, making sure I was all right. I was. In fact, I was smiling myself. She then walked out of my room and headed back to bed, not mentioning any of this to my dad, who was asleep. A few weeks later, my mom and dad were going through some old photos of my dad's family. While looking through the photos, my mother notices a picture of an old man with large glasses. She immediately recognizes the man as the same man who was in my room. She asks my dad who the man was, and he explains that it was my grandfather who had passed away years before he had even met my mom. My dad and his grandfather were very close, and my grandfather's death had a huge impact on my dad. My mother told my dad about how she had seen his grandfather in my room that night when she got up for water. This honestly has to be one of my favorite stories my mom told me about, because it made me know that even though I never met my great-grandfather when he was alive, he still cared and wanted to meet me. Red eyes in the window. When my mom was around 15, she had lived in Germany for a few years. Her and her parents lived in an old 3-story brick house. Though this was a rental house, which they were only going to be living in for a small amount of time. One night when my mother went to bed, she tossed and turned, unable to sleep for some reason. She didn't know why, but she had a horrible gut feeling. She finally decided to sit up in her bed, knowing that something was definitely wrong. Though before she decides to go in her parents' room, she sees a figure standing outside of her window, the outline of a man. The only thing that can be properly made out was the fact that this man had red eyes. My mother wanted to scream for a second, but then something hit her. Her room was on the 3rd floor of the house. There was no way anybody could be standing outside her window, unless they had gotten a ladder and climbed it. But the noise surely would have woken up the whole house. If not, at least she would have noticed. Something in my mother told her not to get up and just to go lie back down and pretend to be asleep, as if she didn't see anything. As much as she wanted to go running to her parents' bedroom, something deep down was sending off alarms telling her not to. The whole night my mom laid in her bed, unable to get up, but unable to fall asleep due to the pure fear overtaking her. She sighed in relief, though she was still unable to go back to sleep, so she got up and walked to her parents' bedroom, where she woke them both up and told them what happened. My grandfather, her dad, walked to my mom's room, Though him and my grandmother didn't really believe my mom, thinking that maybe she was just having a bad dream or something like that, he told her it was nothing and that no one could have been at her window since they were far too up from the ground. My mom begged my grandparents to believe her, saying that she wasn't able to sleep all night nor get up to tell the two of them, though they still didn't believe her. 2 weeks go by and my mother had only seen the man at her window 5 other times, though she felt like it was being constantly watching her, in the neighborhood, that is. She kept telling her parents, though, each time that they didn't believe her, saying that she was just imagining it. Then whenever my grandparents were visiting with the next-door neighbor, my mother's so-called nightmares were brought up by the grandparents to the lady. The lady went pale as a ghost the moment my grandfather described the man my mother had described to them time and time before in the last week. The lady said it was a spirit, and that it had been around for decades, just standing outside of the young girl's room watching them. No one knew why or when the first time the spirit had arrived, but when it did, it never left. Most of the neighbors believed it to be an evil spirit who would prey on the young girls, and once it had its eyes on its next victim, the girl would go crazy seeing the man everywhere they go in the neighborhood. Though it was just a rumor, this was enough to make my grandparents freak out and move out of the rental as quickly as they could, which luckily was extremely quick since they had just moved in and most of the boxes hadn't even been unpacked yet. This had to be one of the more creepy stories my mom had told me. Though many people wouldn't see it as bad, my mom was terrified. Even telling the story, which she won't do often, you can tell she gets freaked out. North African dude, paranormal encounter 8 years ago. I was born in a North African country, left for studies, but my family's still living there. Historically speaking, King Solomon had a fight with demons, and after winning, he sent them to my country, or at least in the region where I was living, as punishment and reclusion. So the place has a reputation of being a very active paranormal spot, especially when it comes to witchcraft and black magic. We're talking about territory of more than 800,000 kilometers squared. So basically the whole country is a nest of paranormal activities. I was on my late teenage years, maybe 18 or 19, can't recall this. We were all living in a kind of mansion house, 3 floors, 300 meters squared, so I'll let you imagine how big the thing is. My parents bought the field and constructed the house for almost 3 years. During the construction, they found a water well with more than 3 water sources. This wasn't suspicious when you look closely at the details. Spirits and demons are always looking for a source of conduction, and water seems to be a very good source to them. Anyways, long story short, one so-called January night, I was chilling on my Xbox 360 on the 2nd floor while my parents were in the basement sleeping deeply. As this place of the house is always the warmest during winter nights, and I wanted to stay alone in order to profit from my, long gaming nights. I remember that I was completely sober, no lust of sleeping, and I wasn't tired. And as a person, I was always fascinated with the invisible world, not scared at all. As a Muslim, my religion taught me to stay strong against the invisible world and understand that each being has its own life and own perception of living. But at the time, I was too young and never experienced anything of that sort. After 6 hours straight of playing Street Fighter and FIFA, I decided that my eyes were deserving some rest, so I went to the toilet in front of my room. I left the door half opened when I came back. I was preparing myself to lay on the pillow when I heard the sound of a door opening. I thought at first that it was the aftermath of me just moving quickly and impacting the door, but when I looked at the door, in what seemed to be like an eternity, I saw a woman. Couldn't see what she looked like, no eyes, shape, or color, just a woman with long blood-red hair and a white dress standing in front of me. With some reflection, I think she stayed for like 3 seconds before coming inside. Sitting in the bed next to me, there were 2 beds because my cousin used to come over a lot, and told me in a nice voice, "You've a lot of dead people in this house. It may seem nice in English, but in my local language, I can assure you that it was one of the creepiest things you may ever hear. I jumped out of my bed and ran straight to the basement. I waked my parents up and told them what happened. My father took a tire-changing tool, don't ask me why, and went to my bed to check if she's still there, and my mother was so calm that I thought I was just crazy. It turned out that she knew exactly what happened to me and didn't want to overreact. I'm 27 years old now, and I left my parents' house 2 years ago from that day. I was never allowed to sleep alone in that room. 3 years ago, a friend of my sister, a medium, came for a visit and told us that the house looks like maybe demons or a spirit hotel. We still don't know what to do, but I am glad I'm not living in that house anymore. Because what I told you now, it's the most notable event that happened, really. Other things like footsteps and noises and nightmares, things changing places randomly and the side eye of shadows are normal to me now. Saved from being a dwarf king's wife. Back when I was in primary school, around 7 years old, I'm 32 now, we lived in a small apartment that was surrounded by trees. We had neighbors, but you'd have to go through a narrow alleyway before you could get to the village's road. I always play either by myself or with other kids under a huge mango tree or some other small fruit tree, and sometimes we'll get distracted and not notice the time until it's pretty late. Then I'll come home. I had no idea that this was the start of a couple of weird and scary 6 years to come. Ever since I had my first communion at 6 years old, every time I'd go to Sunday Mass, and during communion rites, I will always faint. If not, I'll feel dizzy to participate. I always attributed that to either lack of sleep or a hot temperature in the church or whatever. My parents had me checked for anemia and anything that could cause frequent fainting spells, but the doctors can't find anything. They said I should just get some rest, drink water, stay healthy, and the other common stuff. Fast forward to when I'm 10 years old, I started seeing little black shadows before fainting. Again, this happened during the communion rite. The scene is this. I'll start feeling sick, either can't breathe, dizzy, or just feel like vomiting. And when people start to fall in line for communion, I will see these little shadows like they're looking for someone. Then if I make eye contact with any of them, I'd lose consciousness. I never told my parents about this and kept happening around until the age of 12. I always thought that they were like hallucinations and I'm about to pass out. Since I was a child, I never believed in superstitions. I only believe in anything that had a scientific explanation or logic. For when my mom told me not to cut my nails in the evening because they said somebody was going to die or a soul will possess my body once I threw my cut nails in the trash, I kept telling them, nope. I'll tell them if they tell me it's because it's dark and I won't be able to see where I'm cutting them, and I'll believe you. When I started having my menstrual period at 12, the attacks became longer. The fainting spells would now start when the homily starts, and I'll regain consciousness after the communion rites. My parents and my other aunts started being weirded out by this because they've been bringing me to doctors, but nothing. No diagnosis still. Then my healer grandpa, my mom's uncle, came from the province to come visit Manila, and they met to catch up with each other. A healer in the Philippines, otherwise known as an albulario, is a witch doctor, folk healer, or medicine man who practices folk medicine and uses medicinal plants in their combination of modalities such as herbalism, prayers, incantations, and mysticism. We could say it's similar to a shaman. Their services are considered either a first or last resort for addressing illnesses, and their patient claims that the practitioner has supernatural powers that modern medicine doesn't provide. Anyways, my mom told him everything. He said that he can't see anything when he looks at me. I didn't understand this until later. He said that there's a veil covering me like a protection of some sort. So they did a suab, where I had a bedsheet draped over my head and a pot of boiled water with me, inside with tons of leaves thrown into it. The goal of the suab is for the person being treated to inhale the steam from the medicinal herbs in the pot of boiling water while the healer is outside praying and speaking in tongues to rid themselves of bad energy. Once done, I remember the covers being lifted and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, it was time for my grandma to leave, so we bid him goodbye. My mother didn't tell him what happened, nor did I ask. That next Sunday, I completed Mass without fainting. Everyone in my family, even the other families at church, were congratulating me for not fainting. So the fainting has never happened anymore, but I sometimes still see shadows in my peripheral vision and thought that they were just my imagination, or maybe I just had bad eyesight. This is what I thought until we were visited by my grandpa again 2 years later, and he started asking my mom about my suitor. This raised my eyebrows and I asked what he was talking about. There was a dark dwarf king that wanted me to be his wife. The veil that Grandpa was describing was a veil put by the dwarf king to hide me from the other dwarves. This also hid the fact that I was wearing a crown of thorns underneath. So what he described when he lifted the covers, when he was doing the sub, was the following. 1. I was wearing a crown of thorns under a black veil, and my spirit, or somebody that looks like me, was seated at a queen's throne covered around with thorns. 2. He saw little black shadows scattered around the house, as if observing what was going on with me, and ran as soon as the steam escaped the lifted covers. 3. And when I fainted, he caught me. He got scratched by these invisible thorns. He also said that it all started when I was playing alone under these trees, and I may have talked to or made friends with somebody whom I thought was human, since I was very friendly and very talkative. When I got my period, they started rushing and became desperate about the process of wedding because I was quote-unquote ripe to be a vessel and give birth to a dwarf king's child. This explained the longer fainting spells. My grandpa said that every time I faint, they're luring me away to get communion and bring me to their dimension, which I don't remember anything about, to be honest. Anyway, for those of you who know, I guess, or who don't know, when we do communion, we celebrate Him, the story of Jesus, how He gave Himself completely to give us a better life and start new, and a fresh relationship with God. Now, the wedding I mentioned means that I was to die a virgin in this world, and they'll either abduct me or lure me into theirs. He also said that if I were to lose my virginity to somebody else, I'll no longer be quote-unquote useful to them, and that they either will kill me or give me really bad luck. Fast forward to now, my uncle and his aunts are saying that my kids, a boy and a girl, have their guardians since I've been blessed and protected when the ritual was done. I didn't know that it actually got passed on. Anyhow, my kids are both sensitive, but I'm glad that they tell me what's going on with their lives so I know I can protect them if any of that shit happens again.